Hello and welcome to MCU&Me, where I walk us through the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe chronologically. Following the sacred timeline, with the benefit of hindsight, I'll point out nods and references along the way to see how all of these projects are intertwined. In this episode, we're mostly focusing on the events of one very eventful week in 2010, known informally as Fury's Big Week. But there's a lot of superhero activity happening on Earth now, so let's dive right in.
There was an idea to bring together a group of remarkable people to see if we could become something more. So when they needed us, we could fight the battles
that they never could.
We start with Danny Rand, who has spent about a decade now in the pocket dimension of Kunlun. He's been training hard and learned about the mythical position of Iron Fist, a protector of Kunlun, unsworn enemy of the Hand. In 2010, when Danny is around 19 years old, he decides he's going to apply for the position of Iron Fist. The trials include dueling his BFF and fighting a dragon named Shao Lao. After plunging his fist into the dragon's molten heart, he's branded with Shao Lao's symbol on his chest and now possesses the ability to summon and concentrate his chi into his fist, which packs a glowing punch. Back to Earth's main dimension, last we heard of the Jolly Green Monster, Bruce was on the run, fleeing from the US military towards South America. It's now early spring in 2010, and Bruce has gone 158 days without transforming into the Hulk, a personal best. He's living quietly in the Rocinha favela of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, where he's learning to control his emotions and slow his heart rate via breathing techniques and meditation, as well as some other martial arts training, presumably Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or, as they call it there, Jiu-Jitsu. Bruce, a scientist after all, can't help but to try and fix his situation and is determined to find a cure for the Hulk. He's been communicating anonymously online with a biologist in New York that goes by the name of Mr. Blue, who has been testing samples of Bruce's blood in his lab. Mr. Blue thinks he's close to a solution but needs Bruce there in person for more testing. Bruce doesn't think that's a good idea, but will soon change his mind. Why? Well, he's been working at a soft drink bottling factory, off the payroll, to earn some money, and he cuts his finger on the job. This sends a few drops of his blood falling down onto some equipment on the production line. Bruce halts the machines and cleans up what he thinks is the entirety of his blood, but he misses a drop that managed to just fall inside of an empty bottle. Eventually, that bottle of Pingo Doce is shipped off to a store in Milwaukee, where a man then buys it, takes it home, has one sip, and promptly dies. He's killed due to a gamma sickness, which ends up tipping off the military to Banner's location in Brazil. General Ross dispatches a strike team, led by British Royal Marines Commando Emil Blonsky, to the factory in hopes to find and capture Bruce. Ross doesn't tell Blonsky about the Hulk, just that his target is a fugitive who stole military secrets. On May 13, they manage to find where Bruce lives. Before they can ambush him, he escapes his apartment and tries to run away from the soldiers while doing his best to keep his heart rate down. The chase runs late into the evening, and Bruce ends up fleeing to the factory where he works but is cornered by some co-worker bullies who start to beat him up. His heart rate hits 200 beats per minute, so he loses control of his anger and transforms into the Hulk, thereby losing control of his, everything, and raging out, throwing a forklift like it's a softball. Hulk kills the bullies as well as every soldier that followed him there, apart from Blonsky, who merely got lucky. Hulk escapes the scene, and Bruce wakes up the next morning not knowing how he ended up about 4,000 miles away in Guatemala. Unable to return to his hiding place in Brazil and short on options, he decides to make his way to the US in hopes to recover the data he needs for Mr. Blue. Being that he's broke and on foot, this is going to take him a couple of weeks, so we'll get back to him later. In the meantime, we turn our attention back to Tony Stark, who, if not already known worldwide due to his multi-billion-dollar company, is now known for being Iron Man for the past 2 years. He's pretty much a celebrity, even flying into and landing on stage as Iron Man at this year's Stark Expo opening ceremony on May 24. It's a year-long event where new technologies will be shown off by various companies and inventors. It's been 36 years since the last expo was held in 1974. Over the past 2 years, while Stark has successfully privatized world peace, as he puts it, he's also been dealing with an unfortunate side effect from the arc reactor in his chest: palladium poisoning. The thing keeping him alive is also killing him rather quickly. The following morning, Stark is called to appear at an Armed Services Committee hearing where Pennsylvania Senator Stern pressures him to turn over the Iron Man suit to the US government. Tony equates the notion to prostitution because he claims that the suit and him are one and the same, and the government can't just have him. A longtime rival military contractor named Justin Hammer testifies before the committee that hostile countries are racing to develop similar technology to the Iron Man armor, but Stark quickly dismisses the urgency of that possibility, claiming the competition is many years away from getting even close, and that includes Hammer Industries, who is trying to build their own suits for the government. Tony sees himself as a nuclear deterrent, basically a one-man army and keeper of peace. This ego and mentality will be the cause of many problems to come. Clearly obsessed with his newfound power and status as the Iron Man, Tony has been spending less time actually running Stark Industries, which Pepper Potts reminds him of constantly. His blood toxicity is now at 24% and quickly rising. Still unable to find a solution, the last thing he wants to do is be a CEO, so he steps down and appoints Pepper to run the corporation. Meanwhile, over in Russia, Ivan Vanko manages to secure the documents he needs to enact his long-awaited revenge plan on Tony. As you'll recall, while Tony has been Iron Man for the past 2 years, Vanko has been working on his own arc reactor and coming up with a plan to attack Stark. The next day, since Potts is now CEO, Tony needs a new assistant and ends up hiring one named Natalie Rushman for her skills and assets, clearly. This is an alias, of course, as Natalie Rushman is actually Natasha Romanoff, who has been dispatched by S.H.I.E.L.D. for this undercover mission to monitor Tony. The Black Widow was in Odessa, Ukraine last year on a mission to extract a high-value nuclear engineer when she was wounded by the Winter Soldier. This undercover work, first as a notary from legal and now as an assistant to Stark, should be an easy job in comparison. It's now May 27th, and Tony's blood toxicity is at 53%, so he's pretty much living like there's no tomorrow. He's at the Monaco Grand Prix and decides that he'd like to get behind the wheel of his own Formula One car and race. Ivan managed to secure passage to the Grand Prix disguised as an employee, expecting Tony to be there in attendance. To his surprise, Tony ends up on the track, so Ivan has to improvise. He walks out onto the middle of the racetrack while cars zip past him. Vanko extends 2 metallic whips that are powered by his own portable chest-mounted arc reactor. With what are essentially lightsaber whips, Vanko, or Whiplash as he'll be referred to, begins to slice up Formula One race cars as they speed by him, causing all sorts of damage and chaos. Tony survives his crash and buys himself enough time while Happy Hogan and Pepper rush his suitcase-sized Iron Man Mark V armor to him. Now suited up but surprisingly underpowered, Tony's suit begins to short due to the extreme power the whips are outputting as they bind him. Not a quitter, Tony outwits Vanko by coiling the whips up, getting close enough to punch him out and destroy his arc reactor. Ivan doesn't seem bothered by his defeat. Rather, he seems pleased with himself. Why? Well, as he informs Tony, if you can make God bleed, then people will cease to believe in him. Vanko has shown not just Tony, but the world that Iron Man isn't unstoppable. After seeing Stark nearly defeated at the Grand Prix by tech similar to his, Justin Hammer breaks Vanko out of prison the very next day, faking his death so that he can offer him a job. He wants Vanko's help to build armored suits that he can sell to the Pentagon for a boatload of money. Ivan agrees to help Hammer but begins to devise yet another revenge plan of his own. He doesn't care about the money, he just wants to kill Tony since, in his view, the sins of the father pass on to the son. It's May 29, and the craziest week in all of the MCU is about to begin on this day, Stark's birthday. His palladium concentration is at 89%, and he's convinced this is his last birthday ever, so he gets totally Justin Hammered and makes quite a scene. He puts on his Iron Man suit and begins to blast bottles and anything his guests throw at him with his repulsors. You know how you're not supposed to drink and drive or operate heavy machinery while intoxicated? Yeah, the Iron Man suit definitely qualifies as heavy machinery. Afraid for everyone's safety, Lieutenant Colonel James Rhodes heads down to Tony's workshop and puts on the Mark II armor to subdue Tony after a short fight where they nearly blow up the entire Malibu estate after joining their 2 repulsor blasts together, which creates a massive explosion. Rhodey flies away with the Mark II suit and takes it to Edwards Air Force Base the next morning, where the military can begin working on it. Remember, this version of the suit isn't equipped with any weapons, besides the repulsor is powered by the arc reactor, so Justin Hammer is called in to help change that. Hammer not only overloads this new war machine with weapons, but he also plants some code in the software which will allow him to hack it at a later date. While Rhodey is working with Hammer to outfit the stolen suit with weapons, Tony is recovering from a massive hangover at an LA donut shop. Nick Fury confronts him along with Natalie Rushman, who is in uniform revealing her true identity, Natasha Romanoff. She injects Tony with lithium dioxide, which temporarily relieves his palladium poisoning. Fury places Tony basically on house arrest until he can find a solution to his palladium problem. He gives Tony all of Howard's old files and any other possessions that S.H.I.E.L.D. has in storage that might help. Mind you, S.H.I.E.L.D. is still in possession of the Tesseract, but there's no way they're trusting Tony with it. They haven't even told him despite his father being so involved with its research. Fury tells Tony the truth about his dad and Anton Vanko and about the riddle of his heart that he needs to solve, then leaves Agent Phil Coulson there to babysit him. Now confined to his Malibu home, he looks through all of his father's old documents. He finds an original blueprint of the arc reactor that has Anton Vanko's name on it as well, making some sense of Ivan's hatred towards him. Tony also finds old film reels. In one, he sees his father rehearsing the Expo intro video, but then it cuts to something else, a private message meant for Tony. He tells his son that he's limited by the technology of his time, and expects him to make a world-changing discovery when he's older. Tony's got a lot of homework to do, so back to our favorite fugitive. At this point, Bruce has finally made his way to Culver University campus in Virginia, 17 days since the incident in Brazil. He's casing the campus and building where his lab used to be and is deterred from going in right away due to the heightened security. Unable to help himself, he ends up spying on his ex, Elizabeth, or Betty Ross, General Ross's daughter. In need of a safe place to sleep, Bruce turns to his old friend Stan, who owns a pizzeria and gives Bruce the spare room upstairs. Alright, it's now May 31st, and things are going to get even more intense for the next few days as the events of three heroes coincide. Far, far away in another realm, the day has finally arrived for Thor to be crowned as the next king of Asgard, something he's dreamt of since he was a wee lad. However, the ceremony is disrupted by a few frost giants from Jotunheim who have managed to somehow sneak into Asgard and make their way into Odin's treasure room where he keeps their society's most dangerous weapon, the Casket of Ancient Winters. The Destroyer, an automated attack bot of sorts, does its job killing the invaders, but Thor's happy day is ruined and coronation postponed. But how did the frost giants get in? Loki actually lets them in through secret passages only he knows about that are hidden even to Heimdall, the all-seeing and all-hearing gatekeeper of the Bifrost. We can go ahead and put an asterisk on that title. Loki has been jealous of Thor his entire life, and this is just the start of his plan to prevent Thor's ascension to the throne. Meanwhile, back on Midgard, Tony is granted permission to leave the house and visits Pepper at Stark Industries, where he fails to make up for his embarrassing birthday behavior but winds up finding his father's table model of the 74 Expo, the very same one he saw the night before in the archival footage. Scanning it back in his workshop, Tony discovers, or rather rediscovers, that the model is a blueprint for a new element. He snaps into hardware mode in order to build the prismatic accelerator in his shop required to craft this element. On the other side of the country, Bruce disguises himself as a pizza delivery man in an attempt to get past security and up to his old lab. The huge Lou Ferrigno-looking guard lets him pass in exchange for a pie, only for Bruce to discover that all of their data has been wiped from the servers. Back to Thor. Since the trespassing of the Frost Giants earlier that day, Thor has been restless to do something and is upset with his father for not retaliating. Odin no longer has the taste for war and conquest like he once had before Thor's birth. He's much more mindful now and does not wish to disrupt the peace and start a war over what he believes to be the actions of a few reckless individuals. Thor, however, is still relatively young, for an Asgardian, and hot-headed. Knowing this, his brother Loki goads him into defying their father's wishes of doing nothing, hoping it will lead to the canceling altogether of the coronation. Thor takes his most trusted warriors, Lady Sif and the Warriors 3, Fendrel, Hogun, and Volstagg, along with Loki to Jotunheim where they confront the Frost Giant King, Laufey. Fighting ensues and Thor is finally enjoying himself in battle. A Frost Giant touches Volstagg's arm causing instant frostbite, so he warns the others. One Frost Giant manages to get a hold of Loki's arm, but they're both surprised. Loki's skin merely turns blue, then fades back to his regular skin tone. The Asgardians are cornered and completely outnumbered, but Odin appears and rescues them, somewhat de-escalating the situation. Odin is livid by Thor's actions, calling him a vain, greedy, cruel boy. Thor responds just like any vain, greedy, and cruel boy would by calling his father an old man and a fool. Odin deems Thor unworthy, stripping him of the throne, his hammer, and all of his powers, then banishes Thor to Midgard. He throws Mjolnir after him into the Bifrost, stating, "Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor." Thor lands on Earth in the desert just outside of Puente Antiguo, New Mexico. Mjolnir ends up crashing somewhere miles away. Thor is found by an astrophysicist named Dr. Jane Foster, her mentor Dr. Eric Selvig, and her intern Darcy Lewis. Foster met Selvig while studying at Culver University, which is where she also recruited Darcy from to help out with her latest research. They are studying unusual auroras in the sky, and Jane's model predicted another would appear this night. Lo and behold, what they were actually tracking was the Bifrost, which, in this case, spits out a dazed and confused Thor, who is now basically immortal. They accidentally hit him with their van, and then Lewis, quick to the trigger, tases him for seeming drunk and angry, going on about being the god of thunder. They do the right thing, I suppose, and take this random guy to the hospital where he needs to be sedated for the night. Speaking of Culver University, having failed to recover his research, Bruce heads back to Stan's pizzeria to pack his things and move on for his and Stan's safety. Before he can leave, he accidentally spots Betty, who had stopped by for a bite to eat with her new partner. She spots Bruce but fails to catch him before he can take off, only to later find him walking out of town, where she picks him up and convinces him to come back with her to her place. So much for that other guy. Once he's cleaned up, Betty gives Bruce a backup copy of their data that she had made without the Army's knowledge. She tries to convince him to turn himself in rather than continue running, but Bruce tells her that he spoke with General Ross, who told him that he wants to dissect him and turn the Hulk into a weapon. On that note, General Ross pulls a vial from the Weapons Plus program out of cold storage to give Emil Blonsky, who is pissed about getting his butt kicked and losing his men to the Hulk. Blonsky wishes he had his current mind in his younger body. Glad for a willing participant, General Ross uses the experimental super soldier serum on the eager Royal Marine, but only gives him a low dose. He doesn't die, so that's progress, I guess. Instead of testing an experimental serum on yourself just to get superpowers, try instead a tastier solution from this episode's sponsor, Pinco Doce. Packed with the perfect balance of citrusy power. Wait, what are you? Hold on. I've been asked to read a statement from our sponsor's latest press release. Pinco Doce is aware of and deeply saddened by the tragic passing of a Milwaukee resident, which has now been publicly attributed to gamma poisoning resulting from a contaminated beverage bottle produced at one of our Brazilian facilities. Following extensive investigation in collaboration with global health and security agencies, including SHIELD, we can confirm that the contamination occurred during an isolated incident. Evidence indicates that trace amounts of gamma-radiated blood belonging to Dr. Bruce Banner entered the production line during an unanticipated breach while he was temporarily sheltered in the region. All affected product lines have been recalled and destroyed. A dedicated hotline has been established for any consumers or distributors with concerns. 1-800-555-PINGO. Pingo Doce remains committed to the highest standards of safety, quality, and public responsibility, no matter the universe we operate in. Pingo Doce, the official drink of the multiverse. Drink responsibly. Superpowers not included. Now, back to the show. The next morning, on the 1st of June, a local happens upon Mjolnir's crash site. He attempts to free the mysterious object, but it doesn't budge. Word quickly spreads, and the crater site becomes the day's entertainment for the locals who take turns trying to dislodge the hammer from the rock. Wanting to learn more about the mysterious event that left an unusual yet intentional pattern on the ground and fully convinced that the man they found came out of it, Jane makes her way back to the hospital to pick up Thor so she can ask him all of her burning questions. Over on the West Coast, Tony just finished assembling his own prismatic accelerator in his workshop. Phil shows up in time to hand Tony a prototype of Captain America's shield, which Tony uses to level off part of the machine. The shield was with his father's belongings. Howard, after all, was the one who designed and built Steve's shield. The final version used all of the vibranium they had, all they thought even existed at the time. Coulson tells him that he's leaving, having been reassigned to New Mexico. Wink, wink. Tony fires up the machine and successfully creates the new element that his father discovered all those years ago. Jumping way over now to Asgard, Loki confirms his suspicions about his heritage when he picks up the casket of ancient winters. He is curious about his resilience to a frost giant's bare touch, so he decides to risk it. To anyone who isn't a frost giant, the casket would cause instant frostbite, but Loki's skin just turns back to its natural blue color while he's holding it. Odin appears behind him in the vault, and Loki goes off on his apparent foster dad, confronting him about his lies and his true origins. Odin confesses that he took Laufey's son, claiming he had been abandoned. Sure. But also hoping he'd grow up to unify the two civilizations. Loki is outraged and begins to berate his adoptive father. Captor? It's unclear, but doing so causes Odin to slip into a coma-like state known as Odin sleep. Back on Earth, Phil Coulson arrives in New Mexico at Mjolnir's crash site and begins to remove the locals and build a temporary base around the crater. Pretty quickly, he suspects the object isn't from Earth, so he calls Elliot Randolph, the warrior who stayed, as you'll recall, for a consultation. While getting some nourishment at a diner in town since his mortal form now grows weak and hungry, Thor overhears two people talking about some weird satellite that crashed in the desert. Knowing it's Mjolnir they speak of, Thor heads for it, but it's some 50 miles away in the middle of the desert and he can't fly anymore. Nor does he have a horse or a car, but that doesn't stop him from trying. S.H.I.E.L.D. turns up and raids Foster's lab, taking absolutely everything from her, assuming it's somehow connected to the immovable object. She's rightfully upset and wants to help Thor find his hammer in exchange for more answers, but Selvig talks her out of it. He tells her about a scientist he knew who, once S.H.I.E.L.D. showed up, he was never heard from again. He's talking about Bruce and the incident that changed him into the Hulk. On Asgard, Sif and the Warriors 3 show up to court to plead with the king for Thor's return, only to find that Loki has assumed the mantle and refuses to bring his brother back. Thor, back on Earth, still wandering around town looking for some form of transportation, is picked up by Jane, who decides to help him anyway. They drive out into the desert in search of Mjolnir. Back on Culver University's campus, Betty walks with Bruce to the bus station to see him off, but Bruce spots some soldiers who have found him. Turns out, the guy Betty was seeing had called her father. Bruce is chased through the university building, and assuming he might get caught, he swallows the flash drive with their data. He's trapped on a bridgeway, gassed, and forced to transform into the Hulk. The soldiers, including an enhanced Blonsky, try their best to slow him down, but to no avail. Not even the sound cannons developed by Stark Industries could stop Hulk for more than a moment. Overly confident, Blonsky squares up to Hulk only to get Spartan kicked right in the chest and sent hurtling into a tree, breaking just about every bone in his body but somehow not dying. Betty walks out to try and calm Hulk down, convinced Bruce can still hear her. An incoming helicopter arrives and opens fire on the Hulk, not seeing Betty. Angry, Hulk throws debris at the helicopter, bringing it down in a fiery crash, which he protects Betty from, but she's knocked unconscious. He flees the scene and takes her with him. Jane and Thor finally arrive at the crater, only to find many armed S.H.I.E.L.D. agents protecting the newly erected base. This doesn't discourage Thor, however, who starts by sneaking his way in, but then resorts to brute force and violence to fight his way to the center. The entire time, Agent Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, has a clear line of sight on Thor, but is told to stand down by Coulson, who wants to see what will happen. Thor attempts to free Mjolnir, but he's left disappointed and muddy since he's no longer worthy to wield the weapon. S.H.I.E.L.D. instead takes a morally defeated Thor into custody. I should mention that S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Jasper Sitwell is also currently at the base. Sitwell, as you'll recall, is secretly Hydra. Coulson tries to interrogate Thor, but he isn't speaking, still in shock about his unworthiness. To make matters worse, once Phil leaves, the god of mischief shows up and, lies to Thor about Odin dying and that the truce with Jotunheim is conditional upon his continued banishment. Oh, and that apparently their mother doesn't even want him back. Way to kick a man when he's down. Loki is using his magic to present himself to Thor and walk around the base undetected. He even tries to pick up Mjolnir but fails. He likely thinks his newfound status as King of Asgard makes him somehow worthy, but that's definitely not the case. If Thor was sad before, he's completely distraught now. While running tests on the new element powering his arc reactor, Tony receives a call from Vanko warning him of an upcoming threat, basically bragging to and mocking him. Despite the test not being completed, Tony inserts the new reactor into his chest, which immediately starts to reverse the palladium poisoning. He powers up his new suit, the Mark VI, and flies to the expo where he lands on stage interrupting Hammer's presentation. Hammer had just unveiled 4 versions of his new attack drones, each outfitted for a specific branch of the military. A version for the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. But that wasn't all. The new War Machine was also revealed, piloted by Rhodey. Tony warns Hammer that Vanko is alive and is planning something, so he tells him to shut the machines down. Justin refuses, and Vanko begins his hack. The War Machine and all of the Hammer attack drones are being remotely controlled by Vanko, who gives them all the objective of killing Iron Man and causing havoc. Iron Man takes flight to try and draw the fighting away from the crowds of people at the expo, but there are too many drones. The Air Force ones follow him in the air while the others begin to attack people on the ground. Happy Hogan and Natasha Romanoff head to Hammer Industries in order to try and stop Vanko and reverse the hack. Vanko isn't there, and they're unable to stop the drones, but Natasha is able to release control of the War Machine suit back to Rhodey, who can now fight alongside Tony. Amidst the chaos and random destruction, Expo guests are running for their lives trying to get to safety away from the drones. However, one young boy dressed in an Iron Man cosplay stands his ground to an approaching drone. The drone sees what looks like Iron Man and is about to attack when the real deal lands between them and blasts the drone to pieces. "Nice work, kid," he tells him. That brave young boy is Peter Parker, and this isn't the last time he'll meet his hero, nor is it the last time he stands up to danger in order to protect others. Iron Man and the War Machine destroy all the Hammer drones, and just when they think it's over, Vanko arrives, having flown in wearing his updated Whiplash armor. He entangles both of our heroes, who then cleverly turn a past mistake into an advantage by blasting each other with their repulsor beams, which end up colliding and exploding in front of Whiplash. A tactic not unlike when Tony defeated the Ironmonger by exploiting a flaw in his suit. Tony learns a lot from his mistakes, which we'll continue to see, but that doesn't mean he'll always make the right decisions. The battle hasn't quite ended here, as the drones are now set to self-destruct once Vanko dies. Fortunately, everyone had already fled the expo grounds. Well, almost everyone. Pepper nearly dies in a fiery explosion. But Tony flies by and scoops her away to safety just in time. They land on a rooftop where they profess their deeper feelings for one another, and then they kiss. With the threat now defeated, Hammer is promptly arrested for his involvement with Vanko. Jane called Selvig for help once Thor was captured. After seeing her to safety, he returns to the base and lies about who Thor really is in order to release him from S.H.I.E.L.D.'s custody. They go to a bar, drink, fight, and make their ancestors proud. Thor ends up carrying a passed-out Eric to bed and then goes up on the roof of Jane's lab with her, where he tells her more about where he's from, a place where science and magic are one and the same. Wasting no time, Loki visits King Laufey on Jotunheim to strike a bargain. In exchange for killing Odin, Loki will return to them their casket of ancient winters. Laufey accepts the deal. Finally, having fled from the scene at Culver University, Hulk takes Betty to a cave somewhere in the Great Smoky Mountains where she can take shelter from the raging storm of this night. Hulk is still on edge from fighting, and after a massive lightning strike in the distance, he hurls a boulder out into the night and roars in response to the thundering boom. Man, he sure doesn't like thunder. She helps him settle down so he can rest and transform back into Bruce. Waking up the next morning on June 2nd, Bruce is fatigued from his transformation, so Betty gets them a motel room and some supplies, including a new heart rate monitor and some purple stretchy pants, which Bruce refuses to wear. He regurgitates the flash drive with their data, and they watch the news, which is covering the incident at Culver University, showing the aftermath and interviewing witnesses. Not paying much attention to the same news coverage while it plays on the screens around him, Tony meets with Nick Fury to discuss the Avengers Initiative again. Fury wants Iron Man to join the team, but not if Stark is the one in control, as part of Romanoff's assessment calls him a textbook narcissist, to which Tony agrees, so they settle on using him as sort of a consultant for now. Also on the S.H.I.E.L.D. screens surrounding them are markers around the globe for locations of great interest, such as one in New Mexico for the mysterious hammer, another in Virginia for the aforementioned battle at Culver University, one somewhere in Africa likely monitoring curious behavior in Wakanda, and another somewhere in the South Atlantic Ocean where there have probably been odd tremors due to Namor. Still in their motel getting cleaned up and making a plan, Betty is giving Bruce a haircut. Things get intimate, and then they kiss. They move onto the bed, but Bruce has to stop them because he can't get too excited, if you know what I mean. How unfortunate. By now, the aliases Mr. Green and Mr. Blue have been added to the S.H.I.E.L.D. operations database. Bruce sends Mr. Blue an email using those names, so the Army finds out their plan to meet in New York City. They also discover Mr. Blue's identity to be Dr. Samuel Stearns of Grayburn College. Betty buys a truck, and they begin to make the nonstop drive to New York. Over in Washington, D.C., per a favor Tony called in with Nick Fury, Senator Stern is the one to bestow Tony and Rhodey with medals for their heroics. I guess I should mention that Stern is actually a member of Hydra, but no one knows this yet, nor will they find out for quite some time. Over in Asgard, Thor's friends aren't buying the good guy hero act that the new interim King Loki is putting on, and they certainly don't understand nor agree with Loki's decision to keep Thor banished. So they decide to head to Earth and bring Thor back themselves. Lady Sif and the Warriors 3 make it to Earth with Heimdall's help via the Bifrost, which Loki sees activate and immediately tasks the Destroyer to, destroy everything. He confronts Heimdall and freezes him in place with the Casket of Ancient Winters, then sends the Destroyer to Earth and returns to the throne where he can puppet the machine. Now on Earth, Lady Sif and the Warriors 3 find Thor, who is relieved that his father is still alive and shocked that his brother would lie to him about such a serious matter. He tells his friends, however, that he cannot help them since he's immortal now. While S.H.I.E.L.D. is inspecting the landing site of Thor's friends, the Bifrost spits out the Destroyer. One agent asks Phil, "Is that one of Stark's?" To which Coulson responds, "I don't know, that guy never tells me anything." The destroyer first takes out many shield agents and then makes its way into the town of Puente Antigua, wiping out anything in its path using a massive heat beam that comes out of its face. Lady Sif and the Warriors 3 try their best to stop the automaton, but their weapons are no match. Meanwhile, Thor is helping to evacuate locals to safety away from the destroyer's path. Realizing his brother won't stop until he gets to him, Thor decides to confront him. He speaks to the destroyer, knowing Loki is the one puppeting it and can hear him. "These people are innocent. Taking their lives will gain you nothing," Thor says. "So take mine and end this." Loki commands the destroyer to backhand Thor with a square strike that leaves his mortal form gravely wounded. But it is this selfless action of self-sacrifice for the protection of the innocent that makes Thor worthy of his godly powers once again. Mjolnir flies out of its resting place miles away and into Thor's hand in mere seconds, reinstating his abilities and healing him. Thor makes a whirlwind that draws the destroyer up into it and then uses Mjolnir to drive its heat blast right back into its head, ultimately destroying it. After failing to kill Thor remotely, Loki uses the Bifrost to bring Laufey and his soldiers to Asgard. 2 soldiers remain to guard the frozen Heimdall while the rest follow Loki to Odin's chambers. Thor calls on Heimdall to open the Bifrost but has no idea that he's frozen solid. Hearing Thor's calls, Heimdall gathers his strength and manages to break free of the ice and promptly kill the 2 frost giants left on watch. Before leaving with his friends to confront Loki, Thor promises Jane that he'll return for her, and then they kiss. Heimdall brings Thor and his friends back to Asgard. The Warriors 3 take Lady Sif to the infirmary while Thor tries to find Loki. Before Laufey is able to stab Odin with an ice blade, Loki betrays him, killing his real father and making it look as if he had just saved Odin's life. Thor shows up to ruin Loki's clever plans, yet again, and they begin to fight. Loki shoots Thor out of the building and goes to the Bifrost, where, in a reckless act of destruction and genocide, he positions the Bifrost on Jotunheim and leaves it open by freezing the controls with the casket. If left open for more than a few seconds, the Bifrost's energy continues to build in intensity, acting like a gigantic space laser beam that will destroy the entire planet. In his mind, this will prove to Odin that he's loyal to Asgard and not the Frost Giants. Perhaps old-time war Odin would have thought that an okay action, but not the current Allfather and certainly not Thor. In a desperate act to save Jotunheim from total planetary doom but unable to shut down the Bifrost, Thor instead destroys the Rainbow Bridge that connects Asgard to the Bifrost, thus stopping its flow of energy. This also means that he'll no longer be able to visit Jane back on Earth. Again, on the same day no less, Thor has to make a sacrifice for the greater good. Apparently, Asgard doesn't have good enough spaceships or maybe access to interstellar jump points in order to get around the universe quickly, but whatever. With the explosion of the bridge, a sort of portal is opened temporarily in space right below Asgard. Loki is knocked off the remaining part of the bridge, but Thor catches him nearly falling off into the void of space as well, if not for Odin, who had awakened just in time to catch and save both of his sons. Loki, however, facing the reality that his plans to claim the throne failed, decides instead to let go of Thor's hand and falls into that portal just before it closes. Thor and Odin both believe that Loki has died. Loki isn't dead, however, but ends up being spit out elsewhere in the universe where he's discovered by none other than the Mad Titan Thanos, who recruits him for his grand mission to restore balance to the universe. More on them in the next episode. Back on Earth, Jane is left standing in the field waiting for Thor, who won't return, but only because he can't, since the Bifrost is destroyed. It will take a long time to rebuild. The night's not over yet, folks. Emil Blonsky, who only yesterday had every bone in his body broken, has made a full recovery. Eager for round 3 and seemingly addicted now to the serum, he receives yet another injection. The next day, June 3rd, Betty and Bruce make it to New York, but before taking the bridge into Manhattan, they get out of their truck because the police are checking all vehicles. They pay a boat to take them over to the island and find Dr. Stearns at Greyburn College, who is very excited to finally meet Bruce. He takes them to his lab. Come nightfall, the army deploys another team to capture Bruce. Emil is starting to have physical side effects from injecting too much of the imperfect serum. His spine begins to grow and he's losing sight of his main objective, focusing solely on getting more power. You'll recall Dr. Abraham Erskine, who invented the original super soldier serum, told Steve that it amplifies what's already inside a person. Good becomes great, and bad becomes worse. Back in his lab, Stearns performs a dialysis treatment that he created for the Hulk, which successfully transforms the Hulk back into regular Bruce, but it's unclear whether they suppressed a transformation or cured him entirely. Bruce is then disturbed to discover that the blood sample he sent Stearns has been replicated hundreds of times. While Stern's intentions seem altruistic, Bruce believes it's far too dangerous and wants the samples destroyed immediately. The military has made it to the lab, and a sniper tranks Bruce, who doesn't transform but succumbs to the dart. He and Betty are taken into custody and put on a helicopter with General Ross. Blonsky stays behind in the lab and forces Dr. Stearns to put into him what he took out of Bruce. The doctor warns him that without knowing what's already inside of him, the resulting transformation could be an abomination. Undeterred, Emil insists on the infusion and ends up transforming into a grotesque, spiky version of the Hulk aptly named the Abomination. During his initial raging transformation, he ends up throwing Dr. Stearns into his lab equipment, which causes a drop of Bruce's blood to drip and land onto an open wound on his forehead, which begins to morph and grow slightly as a result. The Abomination proceeds on a rampage, tearing apart the streets and buildings in Harlem. Bruce is the only one that can fight him, but he doesn't know if he can transform into the Hulk. Still, he steps out of the helicopter anyway, failing to transform on the way down and crashes onto the street. Shortly after, the Hulk emerges from the crater, angry and ready to end things once and for all. During their epic CGI monster battle, the Abomination ends up bringing down the General's helicopter, but both he and Betty survive the crash. The leaking fuel is about to ignite when Hulk performs a sonic clap, causing a shockwave that extinguishes the flames. He then uses a Hulk smash to throw off the Abomination's balance and chokes him out with some heavy chains, rendering him unconscious but not dead because Betty stops him from killing. This shows the General that Bruce is somewhat in control even as the Hulk, but it's not enough to stop him from searching for him. The police and pedestrians see this heroic act, and the Hulk runs away, doing some pretty impressive parkour throughout the city, outrunning a news chopper. After securing the Abomination, General Ross has Dr. Stearns taken into custody. Having been infected by Banner's blood, he's no longer just any prisoner. You see, the gamma infection has made Dr. Stearns super duper smart, giving him the ability to calculate probabilities about the world, effectively letting him predict the future. That's something Ross is very interested in exploiting for as long as he can. Not long after Thor leaves, Dr. Jane Foster continues her research on what she knows is the Bifrost and the other realms. Over in Asgard, while his people celebrate, Thor is sad about not being able to visit Jane anytime soon. Oh, and he's also sad about presumably losing his brother Loki, I suppose. Meanwhile, Dr. Eric Selvig is recruited by Nick Fury to help S.H.I.E.L.D. with its research on the Tesseract by working on Project Pegasus. Unbeknownst to anyone there, Loki, who is now working for Thanos, has his eye on the powerful object and begins planning his mission to acquire it, along with some other goals that might just be for him. He infiltrates Selvig's mind and begins to pull the strings in his favor. More on that in the next episode because it'll take Loki a few years to put his plan in motion. The key, though, lies in the Tesseract being a gateway to another dimension, as Fury puts it. It's now July 4, 2010, and it's been 31 days since the battle in Harlem. Bruce is hiding again, this time somewhere in the Bella Coola Valley in British Columbia. He's living in a cabin in the woods where he continues his meditation and training. This time, he opens his eyes, which have turned green as he's successfully triggered the Hulk transformation intentionally. Days without incident? Now 0. Emil Blonsky was, of course, imprisoned for his actions, but the World Security Council wants him to be released, and they want Fury to recruit the Abomination for the Avengers Initiative. Not only that, but they want to pin the destruction of Harlem on Bruce and the Hulk since they can't find him. Fury can't refuse a direct order, so he tasks agents Jasper Sitwell and Phil Coulson to come up with an indirect solution to their problem. They turn to their newest consultant for help. General Ross is day drinking in a dive bar, likely stressed, having been reprimanded for his actions that led to the creation of the Abomination. None other than Tony Stark walks into the bar and talks to the General about the Avengers Initiative. "What if I told you we were putting together a team?" he tells him. "Who's we?" the General asks. You see, Sitwell and Coulson figured Stark would annoy the General enough for him to deny the release of Blonsky, and it worked. The request is denied and Blonsky will remain in jail for many years, never seeing the outside of his massive cell. Right? Not much happens in 2011, but what does is definitely noteworthy. Now 66 years since its disappearance during World War II, the wreckage of Hydra's Valkyrie warplane is uncovered in the Arctic. Frozen inside the ship is Captain America's shield and Steve Rogers himself, who is miraculously alive. Thanks to his super soldier enhancements, the cold has preserved his body in a sort of cryostasis all this time. He is thawed out and brought to New York where he can fully recover. Once he wakes up, he sees through the ruse that S.H.I.E.L.D. concocted in an attempt to soften the shock of his sudden presence in 2011. Steve runs outside and is finally stopped by Nick Fury and other agents who tell him the year, to which he replies, I had a date, thinking only of Peggy. Steve will begin to train with S.H.I.E.L.D. and slowly acclimate to the modern day while he awaits his next mission because he is, after all, a soldier. Later this year, General Ross suffers from a rather severe heart attack while he's playing golf. The triple bypass surgery takes 13 hours to complete, but Thaddeus wakes up feeling a new sense of perspective. Although his lengthy military career may be ending, Thunderbolt Ross will remain influential in the corridors of power. The next position in his sight is U.S. Secretary of State, but he won't stop there. That's it for this episode. I didn't want to break up these events because, as you heard, they all took place around the same crazy week, pretty much. In the next episode, all of our modern heroes will finally come together for their first team-up and their biggest mission yet. Thanks for listening.